Will you lose your second home in a divorce case? So if you have a second home, a vacation home, a rental property, are you going to lose this property just because you're getting divorced? Well, I wouldn't normally think so. It shouldn't be how it works. If there's a second home, let's say you have a vacation home, a place you go, maybe you go up north, you go skiing, you go golfing, whatever it is. So you have this second home, so then what happens to it? Well, the first question, of course, would be what's the value of this property? So easy enough to say, well, you're going to be the one to keep it when you get divorced, or maybe your wife wants to keep it, or maybe neither one of you want it and you're going to sell it. But starting point would be, what's the value? So let's say you have a place up north and it's worth $500,000 and it's a condo or whatever type of house it is. So you have this place, second home, there's no debt, there's no mortgage on it, so it's worth 500 grand. You two agree, you and your wife can agree on the value. So then what do? Well, you have to decide, first of all, it's always important to figure out what you want to see happen in a divorce case instead of letting the other spouse dictate everything. But you give it some thought. You say, well, I'd like to keep this second home, so how would that work? Well, if it's worth $500,000 and there's no debt, that means your share of it is $250 and your wife's share is $250. So if you're keeping it, you own it equally, then you owe your wife $250,000 to keep the second home, the condo, the vacation home, whatever it might be. So that would be one scenario. Now, if there's other money, which usually there's other money to pay her off, then really what you're doing is trying to equalize things. So if you have a condo, a vacation home that you're keeping that's worth $500,000, you just need to make sure that your wife is getting something of equal value. She needs to be keeping something worth $500,000. So for example, if you had investments, savings, some other bank account, some other financial account that's worth $500,000, and you're going to keep this condo or cottage that's worth $500,000, you keep the condo, your wife would get the $500,000 in the savings, investment, whatever type of account. Then you're equal. If you're going to buy out her share, you could do that. You could take out a loan against the vacation home, borrow the $250, pay her off. That's another way to do it. You could take out a loan from somewhere else. Maybe you're keeping the primary residence as well and you're going to borrow against that. Or if there's other money you can put her way, you could do that. So then how else would this look? So sometimes you can get into where a second home, maybe that was something that you inherited. Maybe this is, Aunt Shirley's place up north and left it to you, or maybe it was your wife's relative who left it to her. So the source of where the second home came from could be relevant to things. So really, regardless of how long you've been married, it's certainly possible if you're getting into a category of a property that's been inherited, then you may not owe the other person half the value of it. You inherit property from Aunt Shirley, goes to your name only, left to you through her trust or her will, and then you keep it in your name only. You're probably in good shape. That's going to qualify as separate property under Michigan law. Because remember, when we're dividing property in divorce cases, there's two categories. There's under Michigan law, you got separate property and you got marital property. So if the second home is not going to qualify as being marital property, if it is something that would be considered separate property, then you might have an argument, you probably would, to be able to keep it. And then the $500,000 second home from Aunt Shirley that you kept separate and is in your separate name could go to you. You wouldn't owe your wife half of the $500,000 if that's how it went. Now, a lot of times there's kind of a mix of those two categories, right? So you inherited, and it hasn't been that long since you've inherited, but you put it in both names. Or you inherited it, but you put money into it during the marriage. So that can get into a whole different sort of discussion. But in general, if there's a second home, no reason you have to lose a second home because you're getting divorced. You might choose to do that. You both could just say, well, maybe we're better off, we'll just sell this property and split the money. You could certainly look at doing that. But in general, if it's something that you acquired together, if you buy a second home together during the marriage, it's not inherited from anybody. It didn't come from any sort of special source or any kind of special circumstances. You just bought a place to go to together up north, and now you're getting divorced and it's worth $500,000 and there's no debt on it. You keep it, you owe your wife $250, she keeps it, she owes you $250, or you sell it, split the money. Or you might say, I'll keep the asset worth $500 and your wife's going to keep some other asset worth $500. So you're just trying to equalize things. But in general, that's the idea. That's how a second home, a vacation property, or even a rental property is basically going to work. Now, rental property can be different. If you have a rental property and it's being actively rented out, so you have a tenant and it's something you want to keep doing, it's possible you get divorced and you both could hang on to the rental property. You don't have to get rid of it just because you're getting divorced. you wouldn't have to buy each other out. You're going to get divorced, but you can stay together, as in be on the same page with what to do with the rental property. You could stay as business partners on the rental property, continue to own it jointly, figure out what to do as far as the rent and the expenses, and manage it and just run it like a business like you're doing now. You could hang on to it. Or if it's a rental property and you want to keep it, you'd buy your wife out. She needs her half of the value, or if she's going to keep it, she buys you out, or you could end up selling it and splitting the money. But rental properties can be a little different in the sense that you don't have to get rid of them. And for that matter, a vacation home you could continue to own jointly. People usually don't once they're divorced, but you could. So you want to decide, first of all, what's your goal? What do you want to see happen with this second home, with this vacation home, or with this rental property? Are you looking at keeping it? Would you rather sell it? Are you happy with your wife keeping it as long as you're getting your fair share of things? Those are all things to consider when you're looking at second homes.